To the G5 Hive in our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you are listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be taking a look at the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers, who finished 8-5 last season and capped off their 2023 season with a win over Old Dominion in the famous Toastery Bowl. Sorry, Justice. They wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with their spring game on April 20th. We have a special guest joining us today. The Tower Rack is an independent WKU blog. He is the head editor of that blog. When he isn't blogging, he's the owner and partner at Safeguard Insurance there in Bowling Green. He is Matt McCay. Matt can be found at the Tower Rack WKU on X. Welcome to the show, Matt.
What's going on, guys?
Well, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball and talk about those guys up front along that defensive line. Keontae Davis has run out of eligibility, but about everyone else is back from 2023. How did that unit look, and what do you think we can expect here from them in 2024?
Well, I think there are some good players there, but we really need to see somebody step up and be that super productive defensive line guy. Jaquez Evans, he was a linebacker, but he did that a lot, produced a ton. And also, if you look at the stats for WKU, they used Kendrick Simpkins, who was a DB, and he had like 7.5 sacks and 11 tackles for loss, and I think it was like 7 QB hits. It was a really bizarre stat line for a DB, but it tells you that they pretty much couldn't get pressure up front. They're not going to use a guy that much and risk so much loss of coverage if they're not desperate to figure out a way to get pressure. So I would definitely say, especially in a 3-3-5, you're going to have trouble generating pressure unless you have every player that's playing is doing something. And so they need some guys. I don't think there was anybody besides Simpkins who had more than like 4 or 5 sacks. You need somebody that is a playmaker that can bust things up. Maybe, D tackle getting 5 or 6 sacks and forcing some fumbles and just blowing up plays. You need that. So again, it's there are options, and you see some talent there, some nice transfers, big bodies, some length. Deontay McCray, who was an interesting guy, and some other. But I mean, he's got a nice big body, and he was really close on some play. I think he had 7 hits, but didn't have a ton of sacks. So there's some guys there, but somebody's got to step up and make it happen. It's been a while since WKU had a true defensive line stud.
So you talk about somebody needing to step up. Who do you think can be that guy that steps up this year?
Defensive line wise, you're saying defensive line? Yeah. I had Deontay McCray as the guy. I kind of mentioned it there. He's 6'4", so legit size and everything. But he had 7 QB hits, and I forget how many. Let's see. He had 3 or 4 sacks. So he didn't quite get home. But you would think the next step would be actually landing those and getting them down, or making a few more plays or whatever. So that feels like a guy that could really step it up. He was pretty close. You just want to see him finish it off.
So moving over to the linebackers, they lost quite a few guys. Desmond Baker and then the aforementioned Jaquez Evans and Aaron Key all went to the portal. Nico Cooper and Bryson Washington have graduated. They do bring back some players like Kylan Guidry, Sebastian Benjamin, Anthony Brackenridge, and others. What can we expect from this linebackers group here in 2024?
Yeah, well, Jaquez Evans is like the headline there for sure as a loss. He chose to leave and went to Baylor, and good for him. Can't be mad at him. He had an injury this year. He really didn't play this last year, not really. But when he did, he was super impactful. He probably single-handedly made sure USF didn't come back. And had a really nice game there, but then he was injured most of the rest of the season, and so you feel his impact and you wish that he would have stayed, but honestly, he wasn't a part of the team last year, and it was functional enough to win 8 games. So you think that it feels like huge losses everywhere in the linebacking core, but I feel like there's enough there. Who was it? Guidry was leading tackler last year. He's back. There's a guy, Terrence Ellis, looks like a good playmaking transfer kind of guy. That if you look at kind of his stat lines and stuff, I like to see, especially with linebackers, you want to see people that produce, whether it's tackles, whether it's big interceptions or forced fumbles or something like that. That's what I want to see from their history. And it seems like there's some guys there. Chandler Matthews is another guy. I think he's from like Limestone College or something like that. But he had a bunch of tackles and whatever. So there could be enough there in the linebackers to still be, I think, pretty solid.
Do you think any of those guys are kind of in that Jaquez Evans mold in terms of, a good tackler and able to get good pass rush? Or do you think they're probably all just more kind of the tackler variety?
Yeah, I know Terrence Ellis made some plays. It was more kind of typical linebacker type of plays. I don't know if I see his nickname was Donut. It's kind of funny, but Donut Evans. I don't know if I see somebody like him. And he was really unique. That guy had like 100 tackles.
Yeah, he
still
did.
produced nearly 10 sacks. The guy's sideline to sideline and up the field. I mean, he was just everywhere, and it was just, I don't know how you find somebody like that. He was really a unique talent, especially at the group of 5 level. Like, he was ridiculous. And I don't know if people appreciated him as much because they had to use him in so many different ways. They kind of had to pick exactly what role he played when, but he was so versatile. So you miss him, but how much do you miss him? I don't know, because he wasn't there this last year.
Well, the defensive backfield was hit by the portal. Western Kentucky lost their top 2 leading tacklers from a year ago, and the aforementioned Kendrick Simpkins and Talik Allen, and along with TJ Springer. They all transferred out, and then you got, is it Takulve? Is that how you pronounce that? Takulve
I believe
Williams?
so. Yeah.
All right. Rome Weber and then Davion Williams, they're all out of eligibility. Those are a lot of losses. Now, don't get me wrong. They have some experienced guys coming back, like Anthony Johnson Jr. He was in the portal briefly. He withdrew. You got Virgil Marshall and Upton Stout. But this room is young. How did that staff address these losses in the secondary?
Well, first of all, I think the two biggest wins for this group was keeping Johnson Jr. and Upton Stout. Upton Stout was basically going to commit to Michigan and decided not to. and then Johnson Jr. too. He entered the transfer portal and decided to stay. Those were two of the biggest producers in the secondary, and I think Johnson. He had 3 games he was out for injury and still was incredibly productive, and he got increasingly productive later in the year if you look at stat lines and everything. And Upton Stout also dealt with some injury stuff. So if those 2 guys could be healthy, I mean, Upton Stout was all conference level talent for sure. And it's a little undersized, but I thought it was funny that I can't remember who it was, but they decided they were going to pick on him. And I'm like, go ahead. Like, why are you picking on him? He's a good, solid player. But whatever, that was their issue, not mine. But you asked about who resolves those question marks. I mean, you have transfers from Nicholls State, Texas A&M, Troy, Ole Miss, Tulane. There's some solid options there in the transfer portal, and I think WKU has a pretty good history in the transfer portal in general, and I think that's why I generally trust the process here and kind of know that they generally do a pretty good job. And there may be a few spots that end up being a little weak, but I think it's ultimately going to work most of itself out.
All right. If you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who would that be?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I just have trouble making decisions, but I don't know if Anthony Johnson counts because he was a solid player anyway. But I felt like he was the biggest proven playmaker that probably could have done even more. He had those injuries that kept him from really being able to be a consistent player, and I think early in the year he was still getting his footing. So I feel like now that he's got he's really got a feel for what's going on, how things work. We got the same defensive coordinator, all those kinds of things. I mean, should be in a pretty good position to really have a true breakout year. I like him. I think I like Terrence Ellis. I like what I see from just having an idea of what he does as well. And I like him too. And Deontay McCray was the other name I had written down. So I already talked about them a little bit.
If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.